Hello and welcome to DTC Podcast. I'm Eric Dyck. Today I am thrilled to catch up with my old friend Alex Beller, who I met way back in 2018 just as he was starting Postscript. He's a man recognized as a true domain expert in SMS marketing. Alex is on a mission to prove that a brand's SMS revenue can be their number one channel. And in the pod, he lays out a roadmap of how to get there, including best-in-class specific examples of how brands are using conversational commerce and real live human interaction in their SMS flows to increase conversion rates and customer LTV, and how 95% of brands are still not using SMS anywhere close to its full potential. You'll hear how Alex and Postscript are zigging while others zag on AI, occasionally beefing on Twitter, but for a good reason, and pricing things super transparently. Check your text messages later and listen to this podcast right now. Let's go.
Last year, we were struggling with one of the stats of our business, which is that on average, across all our brands, 23% of subscribers buy within the first 30 days. The other 77% don't. 77%, that's very low funnel abandonment. If you've come to a site, you've given them your phone number and then not purchased, that's like a very personal step to take to then not buy. And so we literally started texting people who hadn't purchased soon after they signed up. And we were like, why didn't you buy? And what we learned is that people had a lot of the same questions that they have when they're in a retail store. And so we started experimenting with deploying sales-focused humans into a brand's SMS flows and talking to people who hadn't purchased to see if they could objection handle. And immediately it started meaningfully increasing their SMS conversion rates and adding incremental GMV to the brand, like right away.
Alex, it is great to see you again. We go way back. Why don't we just start by talking a little bit about how we met in 2017?
Yeah, well, it's great to be here, Eric. It's great to see you. It has been a while now. You're one of the first people that I knew within the e-commerce community. So my recollection is that I reached out to you. I forget why. You know what? I think I had some clients who were coming to speak at your event. And they said, hey, you should really sponsor this thing. And this was early days of Postscript. We had a couple handfuls of customers. It was just me and my two co-founders working on the business. And
this was an iStack event.
This was an iStack event.
That's right.
And we were interested in maybe sponsoring. We'd never sponsored an event before. It was truly just the three of us working on the business. And you were like, come to the Vegas event, check that out. And if you like it, we'll do something for San Diego. So that's what we did. And I came out and I met you in Vegas.
That was awesome. And how big was Postscript at that point?
Well, Postscript, it was only 3 people. We'd been doing it for maybe 6 months. This must have been January of 2019. And then maybe February. And we probably had like 400 customers, maybe 300 customers, something like that. It was after our first Black Friday. We'd been in business about 6 months.
Very cool. And fast forward to today. What's Postscript looking like today?
It's a different world, man. Postscript is now about 250 people spread out across the US and Canada. And we have the pleasure and honor of being the SMS partner of choice for about 11,000 brands.
Unreal. Congratulations. First of all, I was saying on the pre-interview there, I really should have invested.
Thank you. You should have. You should have.
That would have been the play.
It would have been.
I should have charged you for the mastermind. I should have, mental note.
It's true.
No,
it's true.
Just super congratulations. I hear a lot of good things. You basically came back on my radar after you kicked up a little controversy in the SaaS space with some of your commentary on Twitter. Let's just talk about that at a high level. Like what did you what were you calling out on Twitter and what's happened with it?
Yeah. So. I've been a participant on e-commerce Twitter, as I like to call it, for a long time now, and it's a useful place where people talk and they dialogue directly. And there have been some instances over the last couple of years where one of the players in our space, they were just doing some things that weren't very customer friendly. We were hearing from customers that were trying to migrate to Postscript that they weren't able to get access to their SMS list, and that's something that we view as the brand's property. And I think that's kind of the standard agreed upon idea in the space. And so people were trying to move to Postscript. They couldn't get access to their list. We were getting repeated reports of this. And even when these brands would try to involve legal, they couldn't really get anything done. Like the company that they were running into headwinds with, this is a behemoth, well funded and all that. And so I just decided that I was going to start talking about it publicly, because my belief is that brands are the owners of their marketing assets, especially their owned marketing assets, like their SMS list. And I felt that if I started talking about it, that there would probably be some pushback from the community. And that's exactly what happened, where right away, not only did dozens of people come out of the woodwork and reach out to me and say, hey, this happened to me. Hey, thanks for talking about it, both publicly and privately. Like, I'd heard about this from a handful of brands. Dozens showed up and said, like, we went through the same thing. But also a lot of people in the e-commerce community just like spoke out in general and like commented on how they felt like this practice was anti-customer and was in bad faith. And so I caused a little bit of a stir on Twitter. It's true. I'm glad that led us to reconnect. But it was mostly just about me feeling like I'm in a position to say these things and to bring visibility onto a bad practice when maybe an individual brand can't.
And it's such a new industry. It's such a new space. This is what industries need, right? They need people speaking out about, like, ultimately that's not going to be a good practice for the industry. Like, I can't imagine someone coming on Twitter and being like, oh yeah, that's good practice. It's good practice that they proprietarily take the, or won't give you the numbers back like that. So it's just something that like had to change in the industry. And I think the moral of the story is that it did. Like, it actually, like, this practice is sort of like is being phased out or is not being used anymore. To your understanding?
I can't really say exactly, but I'd say that since this happened, it feels like things have relaxed a bit, which is great. I'm glad to see. And in general, I'm not necessarily here to like name names or badmouth anyone. I just want the industry to keep moving forward. And so if that's what's happening, then I'm really glad.
So in a space where everyone's recognizing the value of SMS, like how does a company like Postscript stand apart from some of the big competitors out there?
Sure. So it's a great question. It's something I talk about and we think about all the time, right? Because honestly, like, when you compete, there's a bunch of players in the space, but mostly it's Postscript, Attentive, and Klaviyo. And so when you compete against two very well-run, well-funded, good technology companies, to your point, you need to have like some sort of like differentiating value proposition. And so it's something we think about a lot. For us, it comes down to really what we're here to do. Postscript only does SMS. We only do it for brands that are built on Shopify. And the reason is we only do this one thing is because we want to be best at it, right? We don't do email. We don't do non-e-commerce use cases. We don't do mobile apps. We don't do push. We don't do reviews. We don't do, retail. Like, truly, we're super focused on this. And what that focus has bred is, we believe, the best-in-class solution across features, across SMS expertise, which is like deliverability and compliance, and also across knowledge that the team can bring and help a brand maximize. So how that all shakes out is that, like, if a brand really wants to, maximize the revenue from the channel, Postscript's the partner for them. If instead, maybe they really want to optimize for having like an all-in-one tool, Klaviyo could be a great partner. And, I look up to Klaviyo a ton and I really admire them. And so that's how we think about it, is speciality and focus.
Realistically, all in one, like you're talking about a login, like there isn't really data that your platform can't get that Klaviyo has. Maybe there's just ways they put it together more natively or something because it's all in one platform.
Potentially. So our most used integration other than Shopify is Klaviyo. We have to be very good with Klaviyo integration, right? We share thousands of customers. And so we pass, SMS and email subscriber data back and forth so that people can still match and things like that. But it's true, right? For an email marketer who's adding on SMS that wants to base their SMS strategy maybe on some email metrics, that stuff can get surfaced in Postscript, but it's going to be more native within Klaviyo, to your point. I totally agree. Whereas for an SMS marketer who's focused on building out like conversational flows and getting access to new features to like ramp up this channel as much as possible, that's going to be less important.
Let's just talk broad best. Well, what do you think people are doing wrong with SMS right now, would you say?
I think that the thing that I would criticize broadly across the industry is like what the marketing norms look like today. So the marketing norms haven't advanced very far beyond where things started with SMS. So email marketers came in and they started adopting SMS, and they started adopting a lot of the strategies that have worked well on email. And that, because it's early days of a new marketing channel, has been really successful. What happens whenever a new marketing channel opens up, right? You don't need a very sophisticated strategy. You're getting tons of opens and tons of clicks. That's how things work. But over time, you need a more sophisticated strategy to continue to see those outsized gains. And so there are still the majority of brands out there who think of SMS as turn on a welcome flow, turn on an abandoned cart flow, and then send out full list discount campaigns twice per week. That remains like the norm of our space. And what we've learned...
Most brands do that, I think.
Most brands are still doing that.
Most brands I subscribe to, that seems to be the playbook.
Totally. And this isn't going to surprise a marketer like yourself, but that isn't the most sophisticated strategy, right? Like first of all, they're wasting money by sending out a lot of marketing messages to people who aren't being properly targeted, but they're also over-sending to others. And so what I would recommend to the brand who is in that place that I just described is that you have to think like more holistically about the customer journey, and you have to think about what will deliver the highest LTV per SMS subscriber. And that journey looks very different than what you're doing. It probably looks like much more automation flows so that you're hitting relevant messages based on where they are in the customer life cycle. It means mixing in both content and transactional messages, right? So people are getting not just marketing, but also order delivered and things like that. It means doing customer support on the channel. It means having a conversational approach, and it means being much more targeted with your marketing messages.
I like that's it from a very broad spectrum. But what are the top 5% maybe of the 95 that aren't doing it? Like, what are that top 1% doing best with SMS? What is SMS best practices right now encapsulated?
Yeah. So there's some really exciting stuff happening. So the first is that brands who are doing it incredibly well, they have infused the channel with their brand voice, and they're engaging bidirectional. They're treating it like a two-way channel, which it all is, right? We text each other back and forth all day long. We don't just send our friends like a one-way marketing message with
Eric is available at 8 p.m. tonight.
Yes, click here to RSVP. Exactly. And so
I like that.
The brands who are seeing outsized success right now have a conversational approach to the channel. They're sending out very targeted messages, and they're infusing the marketing approach with their brand voice. And so they're routing end users on a very specific journey based on not only what those users are shopping for and what they bought, but also maybe information that they express upon sign up, with the capture of zero-party data. So in general, I would say the brands with a conversational approach are winning, and that conversational approach can take several different forms. It can show up in welcome, it can show up in automation, or it can show up in the form of the new product we just launched, which is SMS sales, like actually having one-on-one sales conversations with warm prospects to help them buy.
And it comes down to saying about sending more messages to the right people, which in that case could be like you express interest in this last thing that's like this. We're just launching this new product, like knowing about where someone is as you're messaging them. And you mentioned zero-party data. So just like walk me through an example. You don't need to call out the brand of just like that. The coolest example, I guess the main example is you clicked on this product, then therefore you reference that product in the SMS. What's like one of the coolest examples you've seen of people getting zero-party data and then using it to engage a two-way conversational flow?
Cool. So one of my favorite examples comes from a beauty brand. They're doing incredibly well on the channel, and they don't discount at all. So they are like doing incredibly well with campaigns automations, and you will never see a percentage off link in anything they do. And so how it starts in their welcome flow, where the first message that goes out isn't "thank you for signing up, here's your 10% off." Instead, it's, "Thanks for joining our VIP list. What brought you here today?" And there's a list of options around, "Oh, well, I have, concerns about blackheads, or I'm like shopping for a certain type of makeup," or et cetera, et cetera. And people express in their response like the sort of product category or the sort of use case that brought them onto the list. And that piece of data, their response, gets then associated and tagged onto the subscriber in the Postscript backend so that the marketing team at that brand can target them off that forever, right? So not only do they then get routed on a like relevant conversational journey of back and forth based on that answer, right? They don't get the same welcome flow as everyone else because they might get routed on different educational journeys based on the problem they're having or the product category they're shopping for. But then when the brand comes back to do campaigns next week and next month and next year, they know, hey, this is someone who hasn't bought that was like shopping for like a blackhead remedy or something like that. I don't know. And so it's that sort of zero-party data capture that leads to a more targeted approach later on.
That's super cool. I love that example.
Super cool. And it's very far from what you were describing, like are the use cases you see of like buy now, buy now, buy now. It's like actually listening to the prospect.
Super interesting. I just think there's so much value in actually hearing those exact examples. Do you have any other examples of like great SMS flows that you could reference?
Oh my gosh, tons. So, what's a favorite of mine? There's a business called Wonderment. They're in our space, and what they do is they provide like a lot of shipping updates and tracking capability. And I bring them up because they built out a whole suite of integrations with Postscript. And when a customer uses both Postscript and Wonderment, not only will lots of marketing messages go out, but very, very up-to-date transactional messages will go out. And these are like really cool flows because we see that click rates are very, very, very high on them and unsubscribe rates are very low. Pretty much what I'm talking about is getting a fun message when your order is like en route to be delivered that day, when it's been left at your front door, things like that. That's a use case.
I just saw a meme on this morning, and it's like driver has put on his seatbelt. Thanks, Amazon.
Yeah, exactly.
But I know what you mean. It still creates touch points.
It creates touch points that are non-marketing, which is really important.
Yeah.
Another one that comes to mind is Feastables. Do you know that Mr. Beast chocolate bar
Yeah,
brand?
they came to our last event in Vegas, yeah.
Oh, awesome. So they rock, and they do crazy things over SMS that I haven't seen other brands do. Like they will facilitate like a rock, paper, scissors game between Mr. Beast and all of his subscribers via automated flow chat over SMS. And like the level of engagement is sky high, and you see no unsubscribes that come through after something like that.
That is so cool. I was going to ask, like, Mr. Beast probably has the best examples of this. You mentioned non-advertising content. And for brands who right now are in that 90% of just sending the out-of-the-box messages, what's the best foray into non-advertising content for brands to use?
Sure. So it needs to be native to that brand. And so this will differ, right? Mr. Beast one time sent out a campaign that just said, y'all got any beans? And then it had a picture of like SpongeBob with his face, with Mr. Beast's face on it. That was incredibly random. There was not a marketing call to action on there. It generated tens of thousands of like excited responses from people.
Yeah, pictures, people sending in their own bean pictures and stuff.
I don't think every brand can do something like that. And I get that. That's not what I'm asking for. But people can start off much smaller. There's a coffee brand we work with called Death Wish. And they market a ton of coffee through the channel, don't get me wrong. But they also do things like they promote like charities that they care about through the channel. They let people know. They do limited edition Zodiac sign mugs that they drop through the channel first. And those are just some like examples that come to mind for me of not routine marketing that builds a higher affinity between the brand and the consumer and the channel.
Amazing. We were talking a little bit earlier about the actual like the nuts and bolts of deliverability with SMS. What's like as the channel matures, is it becoming a bigger consideration essentially that you have to pay attention to?
It should be a concern for any business whom SMS is becoming a more and more substantial revenue channel, right? Our mission is to make SMS the number one revenue channel for brands. And so we have a lot of clients who SMS drives more revenue than email for them, right? It's like a top 2, top 3 revenue stream. And so they need to care about deliverability, even though most brands don't really want to. They want to like hand that off to their SMS provider, which I get. And so here's the thing to know. First of all, SMS is an old technology. It's from the 90s. And it still works through those cell towers. It hasn't been modernized to a very high degree. And so
the base code of it is like really low level code, I understand. There's a lot of our systems that are on this like prehistoric code.
It's true.
Interesting.
And so when we all iMessage one another, that's data. But when a text goes out, that's cell towers. That isn't data in the same way. And so what that means is that there's all kinds of weird nuances and discrepancies when it comes to both deliverability and also SMS marketing compliance. And how we approach it, I can't speak to the other platforms, but because, again, this is the only thing we do, how we approach it is we've just had to turn it into a core capacity, which means in-house messaging teams. This means in-house compliance teams. This means having direct relationships with the telephone carriers so that they feel really good about the traffic that Postscript pushes through their system. And so if you're working with, a tier one aggregator like Postscript who audits their accounts, who gets like very specific approvals to send high volume messages, then you really don't have to worry about it. But if you're working with, a fringe provider or a provider that doesn't care about compliance, you are at risk of, all of a sudden it's Black Friday and your messages are getting filtered because T-Mobile isn't sure what this traffic is. And so it's a weird space. It's controlled by a few players, and you really have to play by their rules. And those players are the telephone carriers. It's, Bell in Canada or Verizon or T-Mobile in the US.
And what does core competency look like? It just means like hiring the right people and just building the right skill sets in-house?
Yeah, it means being willing to invest a huge amount of capital into a non-revenue generating area of the business. It means building out teams of compliance focused lawyers that are following and then advocating for whatever the latest is in terms of Oklahoma's compliance regulation, right? What's going on right now in the US, previously SMS regulation was governed by a thing called the TCPA nationally. Now it's being governed on the state level. And so you've all these different states regulating it differently. And if your SMS platform isn't tracking, adapting, and building tech in the background to comply, you as the brand are the one who's liable. And so it's just one of those spaces that the penalties are much larger than can spam. It turns out it's much more regulated than email, and there isn't much expertise built up in the space about it yet because it's still so new.
And that is why you'd argue it's good to work with a specialist, perhaps, who's focused really on this SMS stuff.
Totally.
Very cool. What else? What else is going on in SMS? What's the next? I guess we got Father's Day coming up. That's probably a big texting event. See a big spike on that day. What's the other thing I just want to talk a little bit about was just SaaS in general. I know that there's a squeeze on in the industry right now with the economy, with consumer spending falling. The pie is not as rising as meteorically as it was in the early days of the pandemic, obviously.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of sentiment about pricing around SaaS. And I wanted to ask, what's your answer to how Postscript deals with pricing in general?
Sure. So we're a little different than a lot of other players. SMS is a little different because SMS is usage based. We get billed for every single message that goes out by the telephone carriers, so we have to charge for every single message. It's the same for all the SMS providers. How we approach it, because I used to be an e-commerce brand. I know that brands don't love how expensive SMS can be. I totally get it. And they don't love that the bill grows as their channel grows, right? Because they're used to something closer to email. How we approach it is we just try to be absolutely as transparent as possible. We don't pull any funny business when it comes to secretly charging people for inbound messages or for billing multi-segments on picture messages or for undelivered messages, anything like that. We just try to be as straightforward and transparent as possible. And the other thing with pricing, to answer your question, is that we operate in a market, and so clients negotiate with us, and we do our best to balance building a sustainable business with Postscript that has a path to profitability and can be responsible with delivering the best rates we can for our customers.
Very cool. So what's your core message to the 95% out there that are treating SMS like a out of the box solution?
I would say it can drive more revenue for you than email does. This is very straightforward. This has been proven. It can do that with a list size that's like 15, 20, 30% as big as your email list. It can be a meaningful top 3 revenue channel, but it requires a dedicated strategy.
Very good. And then, yeah, I'm just trying to think of like lead generation, because obviously every time you make a purchase, you're generating the lead, you're getting the SMS. Are there brands out there doing lead generation to get phone number aside from the purchase? Well,
not. So
is that like a contest thing? I guess that's what you could do, a contest or something as in that vein.
So it's an interesting question. We have not seen brands deploying huge acquisition spend specifically to grow their SMS list. However, they've gotten really good at capturing phone numbers outside of checkout. So we see people capture phone numbers primarily through on-site pop-ups. Also through any other place that's highly trafficked. You know, they use QR code in packaging. They'll put calls to action inside email, things like that. They'll put calls to action on social profiles and in Instagram stories, but it's primarily done through on-site pop-ups. So that we see, and that's the best practice, and that every brand needs to be doing. However, we haven't seen brands really get to the point yet where they're like running Facebook lead ads specifically to capture phone numbers.
Got it. Cool. So SMS should be beating people's email if they can get enough of them, if they do these things right, if they really engage in conversational. Talk to just a little bit more about this conversational approach and what teams look like when you have this conversational approach deployed. And I guess that's going to lead ultimately also into your AI opinions. But start first with the human teams that you need to have in order to take this conversational commerce approach.
Cool. So if we zoom out, where this came from, right, is you've heard a lot from me about how much we believe in conversational two-way messaging, right? We see when a subscriber has engaged two-way with a brand, they're 4 times more valuable, right? They hang around way longer, they buy more if they've had a two-way interaction with the brand. That could be a support interaction, that could be zero-party data, whatever. So we're constantly trying to push the envelope on this. And last year, we are struggling with one of the stats of our business, which is that on average, across all our brands, about 23% of subscribers buy within the first 30 days. The other 77% don't. Now that's really interesting. On one hand, that's like, cool, the channel works, right? There's signal here. But on the other hand, that is 77%. That's very low funnel abandonment. If you've come to a site, you've given them your phone number and then not purchased, that's like a very personal step to take to then not buy. And we were like, okay, if we can move this number even a couple points, this will be very meaningful for our brands, for their paybacks, for how they think about CAC, all kinds of stuff. And so to figure out what was underlying this, we put together a group of entrepreneurial Postscript people. We partnered up with the brand Kalo Rings, and we were like, hey, we're going to run some experiments on your account. And they were like, cool. And we literally started texting people who hadn't purchased soon after they signed up. And we were like, why didn't you buy? We were like, in their account, like, hey, what's up? It's the Kalo team. Like, why didn't you buy? And what we learned is that people had a lot of the same questions that they have when they're in a retail store, right? Sometimes you go to a retail store, you know what you're going to get, you shop and leave. Sometimes else, you have questions, you need help, right? Someone has to objection handle and sell you. They help you put together an outfit. They help you with sizing. They answer questions about materials. They make a recommendation. All the reasons why there are still human beings working in retail stores as opposed to just like a checkout robot, right? And so these were the sorts of questions that were coming up. And so we started experimenting with deploying sales-focused humans into a brand's SMS flows and talking to people who hadn't purchased to see if they could objection handle. And we were doing this with Kalo Rings, and immediately it started meaningfully increasing their SMS conversion rates and adding incremental GMV to the brand, like right away. They went to the CrossFit Games as a vendor, and people were coming up to the booth asking, hey, is Nate here? Where's Nate? And they were like, who is Nate? Nate was the name of the Postscript person who'd been texting from the Kalo account. So clearly he'd been like leaving an impression and he'd been generating revenue. And that's what sparked this idea. And so we've spent the last year building out what we call SMS sales, which is a layer built on top of the standard SMS marketing platform that everyone knows. And what it is it's sales humans that we staff assigned to someone's account. They learn all about the brand voice and the particulars of that product catalog, and they drive incremental sales on top of what SMS marketing normally does.
And sorry, that's on your side.
Yes.
Oh, interesting. Wow. And so brands, when they sign up with Postscript, they can kind of just opt into this. If they have the right volume or whatever, they can opt into this?
It's still in a beta, so we're still hand-holding people as we bring them in. We've got about 20 brands that do this right now, because it's still super early. But what we realized at first, we were like, okay, we're going to build a sales software suite and brands can staff it themselves. But what we realized is this is a totally new idea. It's going to take a long time for a brand to be able to staff this themselves. We're going to have to do it at first. And so the reason is because it's so different than customer support. This is a different profile than customer support. It's different software than customer support. And so we've built this system where now we've gone from being a fully remote company to we have this big sales office in Phoenix. It's filled with sellers. They come in, they're trained on how to sell via text, and they're trained on the particulars of that brand. And then they start having conversations with prospects over SMS, and it's a really interesting end result. I've spent time as an SMS salesperson just so I can more deeply understand the product, and it's crazy what happens. Someone comes in, Eric, and they're shopping at like a soap brand, and you ask them like, hey, like what brought you in today? And they're like, I want my husband to smell better. And maybe they were looking at like an $8 bar of soap, and you get them to buy the soap, but you also get them to buy some deodorant, right? And some shampoo. Yeah. And suddenly their cart size is expanded just by helping them out. So it's a really promising early idea.
I really like it. And it leads into my next question, which is around AI. And I think so many marketers right now are looking to how AI is going to allow them to humanize their brand while dehumanizing their staff, I guess. That sounds terrible, but actually have less people. I like that you're taking the hands-on approach with like real people, because text it's a very intimate medium. It's amazing how much meaning and like connection you can convey in your word choices.
Totally. We're zagging on this point. Don't get me wrong. We've made some pretty substantial AI investments or tinkering behind the scenes. We're playing with stuff, but we are not like shipping out like, okay, now we're Postscript.ai and like you don't have to create a message and you don't have to talk to a customer ever, because I've yet to see a quality implementation of it, and because I think the end consumers know, and because it's not what my customers are asking for. My customers are asking for ways to drive more revenue more efficiently. And so we are going the human-led approach here, because we believe that if someone is shopping for soap and they haven't purchased through the normal automated marketing, you have a specific window in which to convince them to buy. And that should be handled by a human who is great. Now, AI might fit really naturally into certain automated customer support instances, right? When someone emails in and says, where's my order? Sure, that sort of automation makes sense. And we're exploring different automation types, but I don't really believe that the right thing for a brand is to automate away every interaction they have with their customers. I don't think that's going to lead anywhere good.
I like it. Man, it's great chatting with you here. I really enjoy your take on SMS. I just like connecting with you again. And I just want to urge our audience, if you're out there and you're thinking about SMS, you got to go over to Postscript and tell them that D2C sent you as well, because I want to give Alex multiple reasons that he has to keep coming back to our events, and so we can hang some more.
Anyone can email me. I'm around. Alex at Postscript. Say you came from the DTC podcast. Would love to chat.
Amazing. Reach out to him on Twitter if you want his continued hot takes and industry shifting tweets, which well done on that. And as a fellow steward of the D2C industry, been known to be called D2C Daddy actually, so on Twitter, and so I'm really just happy to see that. Yeah, it's just a good move for the industry, I think, overall, and I think we have to keep an eye on practices like that as it grows. It's an early space still.
Totally agreed, but we're here for it.
Nice. All right, thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you're not a subscriber to our newsletter, you can do that right now at directtoconsumer, all one word, .co. I'm Eric Dyck, and this has been the D2C Podcast. We'll see you next time.